Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Networking Thursday. We're very glad you're with us this afternoon. It is November 30th, 2023. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. For those people on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just enter those in the chat window. For those watching on Facebook, please just enter your questions you have into the comment field. We would love to know where you're watching from, so if you want to put that in the chat window, we'd also like to know that also. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help those unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I launched a second website, careerusa.org, to help those around the United States. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. I'll tell you about our upcoming program we have coming up tomorrow morning at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team, also known as the the PIC crew. Remember, your resume, your LinkedIn profile are not going to get you a job. All they do is they get you a phone call. How well you practice your interviewing skills, that's what's going to get you your next job. So for more information, go to dallaspiccrew.com. Well, for every session, we've got a different speaker talking about networking. We've got a bunch of different ones. I'm lining some new speakers up for 2024. So please continue to join us on the second and fourth Thursdays. Today, our speaker is VandeMotter. He's an executive recruiter at Linked Executive Search. He's going to talk about networking, CEO, coach, friend. So this is a recorded presentation. So if you have any questions, we'll get those answered for you at the end of the session.
Okay, so let's just start off, and I have an outline that I'm going to follow. I'm not going to read it verbatim, obviously, but I did a presentation for a couple of years with the SMU executive MBAs, and so I've got some content that I think is going to be relevant and is still relevant to what this is about. But the first thing I want everybody to think about is that your network is your net worth. I'll say it again. Your network is your net worth. And especially if you're on this call because you're in a job seeking opportunity right now and you're looking for a new opportunity, you all have a much larger network than you might be giving yourself credit for. So some of the things I'm going to make suggestions that you do, I'm confident that some of you are already doing these things, but let's just get started. So why would you, or what are the reasons that you would network? So you might be, in a career research stage. Many people today, even though they're employed, are looking for a new opportunity. So doesn't mean that if you're looking for a new opportunity that you're unemployed, but you might be using networking to get information, advice, to talk to people about what are they doing, what keeps them up at night, what are the biggest problems they're trying to solve. You might be another reason to network is you might be going through a job search. So you need to network to learn about new opportunities. And in many cases, the networking that we're going to be talking about today is networking that you're going to do and help in helping you prepare for that job interview or getting that opportunity to have a conversation with somebody in the company. And so networking is not just just do you have a job for me, but it's to, once you identify a company and you're going through the interview process, before you even start the interview process, if you haven't done some significant networking within the organization to learn about what keeps them up at night, what are the biggest problems they're trying to solve, and some of those big questions, and you're really missing out on getting yourself even more prepared than you might have been just by looking at their website. And then another reason you might network would be for just career development, to maintain awareness of new opportunities. I met a young man recently. He is confidentially, I'm not going to share his name or the company, but he's in a manufacturing facility, manufacturing environment. He's a very senior executive. And he's only 33 years old. He's been with this company since he graduated from college. He actually did his internships there. And so he's being grossly underpaid. And it took the COVID for him to find the time to reach out to certain people and to start having conversations. And so now he is, he's got a very good job with a very good company, but he is actively looking for new opportunities so that he can advance his career, not only title-wise, but financially as well. So that's another reason that you might network, is just overall career development. So in order to really take networking serious, it's important that you kind of identify what your networking goals are. Okay, so similar to developing your strategy for your job search, but what are your goals? The fact is that we should all have been and should be networking all the time. But unfortunately, we get busy and we get in a rut and we don't make time to network. And so some of you are having to dust off your networking skills because you haven't been doing it as effectively or as often as you should have been doing it. But you're trying to effective networking. You're going to get information. You're going to make new connections. It's a way to get to a job, but it is not the end all be all to getting a job. That job search requires many pieces to the puzzle that have to be put together, and networking is just one of them. But we want you to, and as you look at your networking, we want you to go broad, okay? And by broad, I mean that we'll talk about this a couple of times, but when somebody comes to me and they say, and many times, and this is happening all the time, it seems like all the time now, but I get calls from candidates and it's, I've never had to look for a job. I've always been recruited or had a job. This is the first time that during COVID, I became unemployed, and I've never had to look for a job. So I don't even know what to do. And so in that conversation that I have with that executive, one of the first things I recommend to candidates that they do is they activate their network. And so let's talk about what that looks like and how that looks in your vernacular. So activating your network is making a list, literally making a list of all the people that you can remember that you've worked with, worked for, people that you've called on. They might have been clients or customers of yours. You might look at people that you've met at trade shows. Maybe you've got a stack of business cards that you keep, that people that you met on airplanes and while you were traveling. You can see where I'm going with this. This is a very large list for most people, and it takes a lot of time to activate that network. Now, after you've identified that network and you've made a list of those people, then we'll talk again about prioritizing that list, because if you ask me to make that list, I might have 1,000 people on it, and I can't contact 1,000 people probably in 3 months or 4 months. That's all I did every day, if I called people. Once I got people on the phone and had conversations, it would take me a long time to make those phone calls. So we want to then prioritize that list into the people that really know you the best, okay? Now, don't take any shortcuts here, because I don't want you to just make a list of the people that know you the best and leave off all those other people, because those other people are very, very important, okay? But they're not as important to the people that know you really well and that can give you advice and will have a conversation with you, okay? So that's the very first thing that we want to do, is we want to activate our network. We want to make a list of our network. Let's talk real briefly while we're on that about recruiters. And I'm a storyteller. Jeff knows this. When I graduated from college, I wanted to go into sales and marketing, and people said, you should go talk to IBM, they're hiring people, and you should go talk to Aetna, they're hiring people, and Pepsi's hiring people as well. And those are 3 companies that I actually literally did talk to and interviewed with and considered opportunities with. I chose the Pepsi-Cola route. But the point is in today's world, as we look at companies, target companies. Or if you look at recruiters, in the old days, recruiters would call people. So I went to work for Pepsi, and they would call me and they'd say, "Hey, Kurt, we're doing a search for a new division manager for a consumer packaged goods company in the Michigan market. Who do you know?" And I just make a list of 3 or 4 or 5 people that I see in the grocery store that I knew. Okay. And if it was a real interesting opportunity, I might raise my hand and say, "Yeah, but maybe I'd be interested in that as well." Well, recruiters use the same methodology today as they did before. So we will find you as a candidate. You don't have to spend a lot of time building relationships with recruiters, okay? If you've got 2 or 3 or 4 recruiters that you've used in the past, they've either placed you or you've hired them to help fill positions, then those are recruiters that you want to try to build relationships with. But in general, my point here is recruiters are not going to be your best means to getting your next job, okay? So these trends are changing, and certainly through the pandemic, we experienced a whole different way of networking per se. But the fact is if you go back to about 2016, 17, there are articles that are written that over 80% of the people that get their job get it through their network. Okay. Over 80% of the people that get their next job get their job through their network. That's a pretty big number, okay? So I would suggest that if you take your week, and if you're working 40 hours a week now on your job search, and you divided that up as far as in those 40 hours, what do you do during your search? If 80% of your time is not spent, or 85% of your time is not spent on networking, and you're spending it doing things like filling out applications and going to job boards and things like that, then you're probably wasting your time. So you need to get that networking number up. Again, much more difficult to do in a COVID situation. And we'll talk about how you can do it and ways that tools that you can use to open up doors. But the key is that networking is a key part of your job search, and you can't do it without it. So what do you get from networking? You build relationships. You enhance your social and personal circles of people that you know. It's a resource for things that are going on in the community within your industry. It could be just events that are even going on the internet, and there's a lot of events that you all can participate in, as you know. It's also a chance for you to potentially pay it forward. So networking should be looked at as not only a one-way door, but it's a two-way street. And you always want to make sure that you're keeping in mind your audience and referring or making suggestions where you can, because that should bring significant value to your whole objective and the way that you network. And then it's just another way of gaining and getting access to information. So I talked a little bit about earlier that if you use networking as a way to prepare for an interview, what that might look like is that if I was getting an interview next week, let's just say that I've got an interview with Board and Dairy. So my interview is with Board and Dairy, and it's going to be a face-to-face meeting with their CHRO, the VP of Marketing, and the VP of Sales. So in a situation or a scenario like that, you'd probably go to their website, you look up what they do, you've looked at the job description, you've got a lot of information about the company, you've gone to their LinkedIn profiles, and you've looked at who they are, where they went to school, what they did, how they got to where they're at. Because there's going to be some kind of conversation that you're going to be able to web together just by looking at their LinkedIn profiles. But now take it a step further and maybe consider looking at people that used to work at Board and Dairy, okay? And maybe even finding somebody that recently left the marketing or sales area. Finding those people on LinkedIn and reaching out to them to see if you can have a conversation. Now, this takes planning. If you if you haven't done all this work and you've got the interview tomorrow, you're going to be behind the 8 ball to get all these calls made and get people to reply to you and so forth. So this work's got to be done. This takes a little bit of time and coordination, but you might find somebody that used to work for that company. And if they used to work there, I'd like to find somebody that maybe worked for these people or did some of the work. Maybe not the guy that left that job because that job is vacant because they fired somebody. So I don't necessarily want to talk to that guy, but maybe somebody, a gal or a guy that is in that department. And I want to ask them just questions like, what keeps them up at night? What are the biggest problems that they're trying to solve? If there are certain objectives that they've identified for this role, then you might ask them, quickly about, are these achievable? Or, these are some of the goals that they've set out for the new role. Are those even achievable? Now, you don't know this person, so they're not going to take a lot of time to talk to you, but that's the direction that you want to go. I don't think you should go in the direction of, what's it like to work for Jack? Or is Sally a real team player? Or any of those kinds of things. It's not it's really content that you're trying to get information from so that you can then have a more positive or maybe a more fruitful conversation in the actual interview. Somebody that used to work for the company, now find somebody that works for the company. Not as important that they work in that department, but maybe that they work for the company, that you can reach out to have a conversation about the same kinds of things. Hey, I'm interested in a role that the organization's got. You don't have to tell them where you're at and what job you're specifically looking at, but you again are trying to gain information and content about the company that you can use during your interviews. So those are some real important tools that if you're not using that today and you're not doing that heavy lifting in preparation for an interview, then that is an element of networking that you're really missing out on. So, why do people, let's stop for a second. Jeff, are there any questions that are coming up?
No, the only, somebody did make a comment. You might get some good information from someone who was fired from a company too. Just take it with a grain of salt because the information could be slanted. Excellent.
Thanks for that feedback. Great comment. So why do people shy away from networking? What are the things that why don't people network? So there's many, and you might fall into one of these categories, or you might have, you might be able to raise your hand for one of these, but I'm not asking for people to raise their hand, but there's many things. It's some people have the fear of rejection. It's the misperceptions of people aren't interested in talking with me about anything. The false belief that talking about myself and my strengths is self-centered. No, you are the brand and you're selling yourself. So you've got to sell yourself. It requires too much effort. It's a lot of work. Or I don't know how to network. So I'm really uncomfortable in there. This is a good time for us to talk about the people in the room that are not sales and marketing people, but might be finance, they may be HR, they might be supply chain. Generally speaking, people in different disciplines are less likely to endorse or to really enjoy the networking elements of what they do. And so as an example, typically finance people, and I hate to put you finance people in a box, but typically accounting finance people, they don't feel comfortable networking and they're afraid because they don't know what to say and they've got a real fear of doing it. Well, in that case, if that's you, and again, you don't need to raise your hand, but if you've got one of those fears, I want you to find somebody that you can talk to on a weekly basis that is a sales and marketing person that can help teach you some of the things that you need to learn in order to better present yourself, okay? So it's okay if you've got one of these fears or one of these reasons that you're afraid to network. It's A-okay, but don't just accept it and move on. You've got to overcome that objection. I tell a story about when I was in college, my professor handed somebody a pen and said, sell me this pen. And that you go, well, gosh, it feels really good in my hand. It's got these nice cushions on it. It writes in a really nice blue. It doesn't smear. It's got nice space. You can put your logo on it. This happens to be a Marriott pen, good brand, nice pen. It's stable, it's sturdy. And I like the pen a lot. I'd feel comfortable giving this to somebody as a gift or just as a thank you. Well, now you are the Big Pen. Everybody in this call today, you are the Big Pen. You have to sell yourself, okay? And so you have to find those key attributes and those distinctive differences that build your brand, okay? And if you don't feel comfortable talking about your brand and you don't like doing that, then again, find somebody that you can network with, find somebody that you can talk to that's really good at that stuff, that can coach you and give you advice and help you get over those fears. So some suggestions to overcome some of those fears are, to learn from the best. So you made the first step by coming to the seminar. I'm not going to suggest that I'm the best networker. I do have an extensive network, and I don't know how you describe that in any monetized or any other way, but I have always been a networker, and I've always been an open networker. And I am called very, 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 very frequently for people to either ask for referrals or ask for recommendations or ask for advice or ask for suggestions. I probably give away tens of millions of dollars worth of revenue every year to people. And so for that, I'm just considered a networker. I hope that brings a little bit of value. And again, if any of you got any questions about this is a time to bring it up. But if you want to wait until later, I'm happy to have that conversation with you offline as well. The thing, let's go back to, I encourage you to build that activation and the people that you want to network with and have a conversation with. So let's go back to that. And I want you to be as formal as actually provide or building a tracking system for this, okay? Because there's another tool that I'm going to offer you that I think is a real effective way to communicate with your network after you've activated it. But what I would do is create a tracking process that you can, in your job search, make a list of all of those people, email addresses and phone numbers. I don't think you need their physical mailing addresses, but I do recommend email addresses and phone numbers for every one of those people. And until you've got that job, until you've got that 100% completed, you're continuing to fill that sheet out. But you can, through the networking, and if you're doing a job search, I would encourage you to keep on that same list of people that you've met, who introduced you. You might even list where you met and what did you discuss, and if there were any follow-ups. It's not a bad way to just keep track of your network, especially over the job search, because if that job search extends past 3 or 4 or 5 months, then you do lose track of when you met with somebody, and maybe you need to go back and circle back, or maybe somebody you met early in the search might be a valuable asset to your search 4 months into it. So not a bad idea, but it does require some extra work. We talked about making a list, and so now you've got that list of, let's call it 100 people, okay? And that's what your goal ought to be, is to get to 100 people. And we activate the network by literally calling every one of those 100 people, okay? And we're doing it for 2 reasons. We're doing it, one is to have that one-on-one conversation that just says, hey, Jack, I'm actively looking for a new job, and I really enjoyed working with you. And this shouldn't be a voicemail either. This should be the conversation you're having. But I really enjoyed working with you when we worked at XYZ. You were a great boss, or you were a great client. I always remember the stories that we talked about going fishing with our kids, or whatever it might be. And I just want you to know, I want you to know that I'm actively looking, and somebody may come to you someday in the next couple of months that might say that they're looking for somebody like me. And I just want you to be aware that I'm looking for a new opportunity. That then will generally go into another 30 or 40-minute conversation about, well, what happened and what do you want to do and who are you talking to and have you talked to Bob or did you talk to Mary? You know, these are some other people you should reach out to. So it'll create all kinds of different things and action items, and you'll be amazed at the amount of energy that it creates. Okay. Now, if you can't get somebody on the phone, it's okay to leave them a message. That's a-okay. But ultimately, you want to try to have a conversation with all these people, and you want to try to do that in about a 30-day period, because now some other things that you want to ask these people, make sure that you got their right email address. Hey, I'm updating my database. I got your phone number, but I want to make sure that I've got your right email address. Some of the people on the list, you might have another box that you'd say, you know, I know I'm putting the cart before the horse here, but so that I don't have to bother you later, could I put you on my list of people that I could use as a potential reference? Okay. So you might have a column for references that you check 6 or 7 names on that list, and you've got an easy place to come back to develop that list of people when the company says we need references and you're scrambling to make calls and who do I talk to and so forth. You've got that heavy lifting already done. So now you've activated your network, but now the real key is how do you continue to communicate with those people? Because every month you can't call 100 people or those same 100 people, but you've got to figure out a way to communicate with those people in a social media kind of model. And the tool that I recommend is a tool that I should have been tracking for 15 years that I've been doing this, but I call it the prayer letter. And I know it's going to sound kind of silly, but this tool does work. So if you've got an instinct to make notes, take notes on this conversation. So the prayer letter is very simple. You've gotten this letter before, and you've gotten it before, and when you've gotten it, it says read this prayer 10 times in the next 10 minutes and send it to 10 people, or you're going to die and go to hell. Okay, well, in a job search, it doesn't sound exactly like that, but it is one of those kind of letters. And here's what it says. It says, and what you do is you've got those 100 names, you maybe have 250, maybe you've got 400 names. You take those names and you take all those email addresses and you put them into a BCC. Okay, when you're sending an email message, you don't have to have a to and you don't have to have a CC. So you put everybody in BCC so that when those people hit reply all, nobody can see the names, okay? Nobody has access to that. So you put them all in a BCC, and then in the subject line, it says, great people know great people. And in the body of the email, it says, just as a reminder, I continue to look for new opportunities. And some of the target companies that I'm looking at this month include, and you give them 3 or 4 names of companies that you're actively looking at or talking to. And then it says, if you or anybody in your network has contacts with anybody in these organizations or organizations like these, I would greatly appreciate an introduction. If there's anything that I can do for, and then in the next sentence, excuse me, it says, feel free to forward this on to anybody in your network. And then the last thing is you always want to pay it forward. If there's anything that I can do for you or anybody in your network, don't hesitate to call or write. I'll be back in touch in 30 days. So if you activated your network, you spent all that time, you had all those great conversations, and you leave it at that, you're failed. You will fail. Because 60, 90 days from now, every one of those people are going to forget. Most of them are going to forget that you're still looking for a job because they haven't heard from you. So they're going to assume. They're going to assume that Jeff got a job because he hasn't called or written since then. And we don't want anybody to assume when we're going through a job search, okay? So we want to keep them updated. You can take the format that I've given you and modify it every month so it looks crisp and clean. But it literally takes 5 minutes to prepare this email and to send it out. And again, remember your network is your net worth. So every month you're reminding your network, and it may take a month or two for somebody to get back to you. You might not get 25 people that say, hey, yeah, I know people here, I know people there. You're going to have to continue to lean in on your network and continue to activate your network so that they can work for you. But this tool, I'll give you an example. There was an executive that came to me through my network, and he had been the CFO of, very, 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 very large family office down in the Killeen area, billion-dollar family business. He had been with them, like this other executive that I talked about. He had been with them. He was 45 years old. He had been with them for his whole career. He had worked his way up. He had started there as an intern, and he became the CFO of the company. And he had been the CFO for 18 or 20 years. And the new generation, the third generation came in, and they decided that they wanted somebody that was younger and that brought new ideas to the table. They didn't want that 45-year-old guy. And so he became unemployed, and he came to me, and he was one of those guys that was afraid of his shadow, in the sense that very good at what he did and very, very confident in his skills and so forth. But he wasn't used to going out and networking and selling himself, because he didn't have to. He did it socially, but he didn't have to do it from a business perspective. So we talked about the prayer letter, and he sent me back a note about 4 months later, and he said, Kurt, within 3 months, I had 4 job offers, and I got a better job, I'm making more money than I've ever made before in a new industry, yada, yada, yada. So, I get endless stories about that from people that this tool really does work. So if you've got questions about it, I think on my website, I've got an actual video where I do a prayer letter like I did for you all, but happy to go through that again, Jeff, if people want to hear it again, or any questions at this point, because we're about 35 minutes into this now.
First question was, can you suggest a good tool for tracking all your contacts? Is it just a simple Excel spreadsheet or something better?
No, Excel. That's it. Keep it simple.
Right.
And I don't, somebody might have a better suggestion, but that's the one I know of.
And plus, by doing this, you're working on your Excel skills, because you can go and do all sorts of fun things with it if you know the features and functions. So do something.
Yep.
A couple of people have asked, can you please repeat your prayer letter? I mean, because people want to, they want to actually get a copy of it. And I said, well, we don't have a hard copy, but if you could just repeat it, audio, and then people can jot it down.
Yep, and I'll go slow. So everything goes into a BCC, and in the subject matter, it says great people know great people. And then in the body, it says, if you, as you remember, or if you didn't know, again, that can be subject to, the second, third, fourth letter you're writing. But if you didn't know what I was up to, you wouldn't know that I'm in a job search and I'm actively looking for a new opportunity. So you state what's going on. And then some of the target companies that I'm looking at include, and you give them 4 or 5 companies. And then if you or anybody in your network knows of people that work at these companies or companies like these, I would greatly appreciate an introduction. Feel free to forward this on to anybody in your network. And then lastly, if there's anything I can ever do for you or a friend, don't hesitate to call or write. I'll be in touch in 30 days. Now, the reason we say if you know of companies, these companies or companies like these, is that one of your targets might be American Airlines. And if I got that letter, I'd say, well, gosh, I don't know anybody in American, but I know the CEO of Southwest Airlines. Would that be a good introduction for you? So that's why instead of telling people what you do, I'm a sales or a marketing guy, you give them target companies and you ask for companies like these, because you might put down Borden Dairy and they don't know anybody at Borden, but they get the fact that that's a consumer packaged goods company and their neighbor is the CEO of Frito-Lay, right? Would you like to meet Jack? He's the CEO of Frito-Lay. So that's why we say it the way we say that. And then we give permission to forward it on to anybody. And then we always want to pay it forward. If there's anything I can do for you or anybody in your network, anybody in your network, don't hesitate to call or write. Good. So, I think the next thing we talk about in networking is, when and where and so forth. And I'll tell you that the content that I had prepared for, when I was doing this at SMU is quite different because we're in a COVID, obviously, hopefully coming out quickly, but the last year has definitely been a challenge. I would encourage you to not worry about the past, but let's talk about what you can do in the future, because again, I think that things are going to change and I don't want to dwell on the past. But going forward, obviously, we want to try to have as many networking meetings as we can face-to-face. During COVID, we couldn't. Going forward, we should be able to. For those of you that aren't in the state of Texas, you might want to get here as fast as you can. But the bottom line is you try to have these meetings in person, but if somebody doesn't feel comfortable with it, then you could certainly do a phone call, or you can do a Skype or a Zoom call. That's okay as well. But ideally, you want to try to do those meetings face to face. You want to be prepared to kind of tell what your story. So show up, not just, hey, this is really great that we're getting together. Have an agenda and be able to and be prepared to tell your story about what's going on and what you're trying to do. Again, whether that's face to face or it's a phone or it's a Zoom, going forward, try to do as many of those as we can face to face. I want to go back a step though. There was something that just came across my mind that I wanted to. I can't remember what it was, so we'll continue to go forward. Sorry. So we want to be prepared going into those meetings to know what we're going to talk about and having some content, not just showing up asking for a favor. So, before those meetings, make sure you're checking out where they're working, where they did work, where they went to school. Those are all great conversation starters. I didn't realize that you went to Notre Dame. Wow, go Irish. Great conversation. I didn't go there, but I'm a huge fan. I mean, it can be just that simple. But then be ready to listen, okay? Because the person that you're networking with, the favors that you're asking, once they know what your situation is, then they're going to start to offer all kinds of suggestions or input, ideas, maybe people that you should be, they think you ought to meet as well. Make sure you're prepared to listen. Make sure you're prepared to take notes and have a notepad. I can't tell you how many people. Another story, Jeff, real quick. When I came out of college, I went to work for Pepsi-Cola, and my first day on the job, I worked with this guy. He was the vice president. He took me out to look at grocery stores for a half a day. Ron Fellows, I'll never forget him. A wonderful man, wonderful man. And we walked into the grocery store, and the first thing that he did is he went over to the paper section of the grocery store. He found a notepad and a pen, and he went to the cashier and he bought the notepad and the pen and the notepad, and he handed it to me. And he said, "You will never be with me again without a notepad." Okay. Well, I mean, he did it in a very kind way, and I was coming out of college. What did I know? But I'll tell you what, I don't go anywhere today without a notepad. Okay. Hardly anywhere without a notepad and a pen. But I can't tell you how many people that ask me to come to coffee or want to meet, and they don't have anything to write on, and their skills in putting that content into their phone is not stellar. Okay. And it's kind of an insult to me, because you came and you want me to talk to you about different things and offer you advice and give you introductions, and you don't have the courtesy to write it down. How are you going to remember all this stuff? Okay. So don't be that guy. Make sure you do not be the Kurt VandeMotter and be the Ron Fellows, and make sure you show up with a pad and paper every time. Okay. When you're networking with somebody, I think that this is another great suggestions. I know what I was going to tell you before. Don't send your resume. When you send that prayer letter out, guys, do not send your resume. Okay. You're trying to create conversations, and resumes are a way to close doors. So don't ever blanketly send your resume to 100 people or to 50 people. only when they ask you to send a resume do you then send that to them. Okay. So now we're going to go back to being prepared. And what I encourage you to do is as you finish those networking meetings, if you're networking with somebody that's unemployed, they get it. They know how important that follow-up is and how important that introduction is that you offered to make. So you probably don't have to remind somebody that's unemployed. But if you're networking with somebody that's employed, you best send them a note afterwards that reminds them of everything that they agreed to do. Okay? So that includes, hey, John, that was a great meeting. Thanks again for offering to make introductions to John, Jack, and Sally. I know you're real busy, but if you could do it by Wednesday of next week, that would be great. I'm including 3 sentences at the bottom of this email that you can cut and paste that will make those introductions a little easier. Okay? But the point is that unemployed or people that are employed are the worst networkers. And you've been in that role, you've been that guy, you forgot, you got busy. And the same happens today. The guy or the person that you're interviewing or talking to, networking with, the minute they leave that meeting, their phone is ringing, they've got messages to return, they're trying to figure out where they're going to go to dinner before their kid's soccer game tomorrow night. Saturday's around the corner and they promised their wife that there'd be a date and a movie. They're trying to figure out where they're going to go. They had a flat tire and they missed their connection to their next flight. So they have so many other things on their mind that you're doing them a favor by reminding them, and you're doing them even a bigger favor by writing that introductory email so that all they have to do is put a sentence on at the beginning and one at the end, and then you've taken care of giving them all the details. They don't need to look at your resume and figure out, is Jackie really a supply chain executive or is she a finance executive? They've got all the information. You've given them what you want to be in that introduction, okay? But the hard thing is following up with these people after a week goes by and they haven't made those introductions, you haven't seen those emails, you've got to lean back on those people 3-4 days into that conversation and remind them that they, again, I know you're super uber busy. Is there anything that I can do to make your job any easier? But again, I really appreciate the introductions to John, Jackie, and Sam that you offered earlier. So don't hesitate to continue to remind people, and they won't be insulted because they're just busy and they forgot. Okay. So what are some reasons not to network? Well, it's insincere at best, or it's manipulative at worst. Okay. And people do it because it's they lack the confidence or they fear that rejection. So I encourage you to put those behind you. Again, if you've got any issues with any of those things, you don't have to pay anybody, but find a coach to help you get out of that rut and get into the networking mode. So a few just reminders. We've talked about 4 or 5 things here, but first, networking requires time and commitment. You can't do it in your sleep. It's not going to do it by itself. You can't set an alarm and expect it to be done on its own. You've got to do it yourself. It takes time, commitment, and it's heavy lifting. But only you can do this. There's only one person that can do it, and it's got to be you. It requires that you have a plan. So make sure that you put that plan together, develop that list, identify who's on that target list. Who do you want to be on that target list? Some people that you want to meet. It requires follow-up, okay? You can't just go meet with somebody and expect all the work to be done and I had a great meeting and I know I'm going to get 4 job offers, so I'm going to go play golf the rest of the day, okay? Doesn't work that way. It requires follow-up and it requires your attention. And then it takes time and solid communication skills. So if you don't know what your brand is, if you don't know how to sell that pen, if you don't know what your brand is and what the key attributes are and what are the differentiators of your brand versus all the other brands in the market, then spend some time to get to know yourself. Spend some time to write those notes, prepare yourself so that you can present yourself even better than before, possibly.
I do have a question. What do you think about bios, one-page bios?
I like bios, but sometimes bios for a senior executive, a bio is excellent. But bios can come across as that you're trying to hide something. So having a bio is okay, but a bio generally doesn't have all the dates in it and all that kind of stuff. So not a bad thing to have, but
I mean, I didn't know if you would something you would use like if you're going to have a networking meeting.
Yeah, that's
Starbucks,
exactly.
Yep, you send that to them beforehand, because also it gives them pictures so they know what you look like.
Yep.
If you've got a current picture.
Yep. Excellent. Yep. Agreed.
Okay. And the other comment I have on the prayer letter, I know somebody else who sort of did the same thing. They did it every 3 weeks instead of every month.
Right.
But in the very first paragraph, they put, especially if it was the second or third time, I want to thank the following. I want to thank Mary Jo, Sue, and Roy for their help last month.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, here's here's what I'm doing. So,
yeah. No, anything that you can do to personalize that is great. It's fairly generic, the form I gave you, but you're sending it out the third, the fourth, the fifth month, and you've got to add some creativity to it. So absolutely, that's a great way to, you see, you're the recipient of one of those and you see your name on it. It's like, wow, they really did, John did care. He took the time to recognize that call I took with him. That it's appreciative.
Right. So
Jeff, there's one other thing I want to throw into this, and it's not in the networking subject, but I want to throw it out there because we've got about 41 participants on Zoom, and I don't know how many on Facebook, but I had a recent experience that I want to share with candidates, and because it also requires some preparation and some practice. And it's around the subject matter of thank you notes. And it's a step above thank you notes, and it's something that people are doing today, and it's a video thank you. Has that come up in any of the subjects and conversations that you and some of the other people have been having over the last couple?
It has. I think the question becomes, number one, it has to be short, maybe less than 60 seconds, because
Correct.
It needs to be a small enough file that you can attach. And number two, there are people out there, if you're at all security conscious, you're not going to open a link if you don't know what it is.
Yep.
So unless you put something in, you just can't send the video. You've got to still put a comment on there.
Right.
I hope you'll open my video
Yep.
thank you note or something.
Yep. And so those are two very, very important points. And maybe I should write a blog about that 30 to 40 second thank you, but you're absolutely right. It's got to be short and to the point. But I think even the bigger question is I had a candidate that was interviewing for a chief administrative officer position recently with a very, very, very large organization, multi-billion-dollar family-owned business. And she asked me as a final meeting, she had the meeting with one of the most senior executives in the organization before she was invited in to meet the COO. And she said, do you think it's appropriate if I send a video? And it was the first time ever a candidate had ever asked me this. Okay, Jeff, that was the first time. And it was just like 45 days ago. And I said, gosh, I don't know. I said, this is a really conservative organization, but if that speaks to you and you feel confident in doing that, and you had a really good exchange with the person, then go for it. It's a differentiator. I can't tell you if it's going to be a good or a bad one, but it's a differentiator. So she did it and she sent it. And the next day I had a call with the executive team, and the person that she sent it to got it within seconds of her sending it, opened it up, absolutely loved it, went into the CEO of the company, and it says, look at, this is potentially a new employee of our company. Look at this. This is amazing. Took it over to the COO. So I just want to encourage people, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't do it. If you want to try it, practice it, send it to a friend first. But follow the rules that Jeff recommended. But I just want to, I'm going to start talking about video thank you notes because it's a differentiator. And I think that in most cases, I'm willing to say 98% of the time, it will be perceived as a positive, not a negative.
Okay. And one other thing about thank you notes that I have, read a little bit about is that if you're sending a thank you note, so you can just type it up in an email, but even better, go ahead and handwrite it out, scan it, and then send that scanned version showing that you took the time to handwrite something personally, because you may not have their email address, or you may not have their physical address because everybody's working from home. If you were to go mail it to a company, it could be a month before somebody picks up their personal mail.
That's right. Yep. Good point. Great recommendations, guys. I hope everybody's enjoyed this call. Jeff, thank you. I'm going to back off early.
All right, that is Kurt's presentation. Let me get through here a couple slides. There were a couple questions that popped up in the chat window. In fact, let me stop sharing for just a second. A couple of things popped up in the chat window. Dan asked, should I send a bio? Yes. Now, he said that, Kurt says that, a bio says you're hiding things. I don't really think you're hiding things. I think what you're doing is you're telling somebody who you are on a higher level. It's a great networking tool. Your picture's on it. You do put the dates of the company, the time you worked at a company on some of the bios. And we've got sample bios. If you go to the careerusa.org website, you can find some of the bios that we've got listed. We've got 2 sample bios listed, but you can go online and find tons of different bios that are out there that you can use. You do write it in first person because you're trying to tell somebody who you are. It's a, like I said, it's a great networking tool. Let's see, were there any other questions? That was really the only question I saw on there. I did put the prayer letter in the chat window. Hopefully you've downloaded that, save it someplace on your computer. I think it's a great tool. I think it's extremely effective. I've seen people use it, and like Kurt talked about, people they're getting it really, really quickly. So definitely think about that. All right, let me share a few more slides. We will get out of here today. Career DFW, Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Please join us tomorrow morning at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. We'll be open forum. We'll talk about whatever it is you would like to talk about. If you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, please come join us in person. Christ United Methodist Church, 3101 Coit Road in Plano, the northwest corner of Parker and Coit. Otherwise, if you're outside the DFW area, join us on Zoom or Facebook Live. Next Tuesday, our LinkedIn presentation will be with Terry Sullivan, how to create a LinkedIn brand of who you are, what you do, and how you can help. Yeah, Dan, you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to download that prayer from the chat room. I'm struggling with it, so I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, all right. If you start having issues, I'll help you here right at the end before we get done. All right, so next Tuesday, how to create a brand, LinkedIn brand tells your key contacts who you are, what you do, and how you can help. The event will not be recorded, so if you do want to see Terry, watch him next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Central Time. Next Wednesday, the Practice Review team will be meeting again in person. They meet in person on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month, so come join us, being the first Wednesday in December. So come join us right there. There'll be no online Zoom or Facebook Live session that week. And then next Thursday, being the first Thursday of the month, we'll talk all about effective resumes, primarily resumes for an ATS system and some just basic common sense things that your resume should be doing. So formatting and some issues to make things easy for the recruiter to read. So come join us for that. You're welcome to join the Career DFW or Career USA LinkedIn groups. You do not need to live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to join the Career DFW group. We've got over 15,000 members, and probably 1 out of those 15, they're recruiters, they're in HR. They join this group because they're trying to find you. Make sure your LinkedIn profile is mostly complete. I will look at your profile before I let you in the group, because if your profile is not mostly complete, why are you joining? Doesn't really help. Okay, you want to be on LinkedIn so people can find you. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. On the Career USA YouTube channel, click on playlist. All the videos that I upload, this video will be up there in a couple hours. Go into one of the different playlists. In this case, since we're talking about networking, it'll be in the networking playlist. Where you see that red circle, just click on View Full Playlist. You can go back and watch any of the speakers that we've had at your convenience there. If you're not receiving emails about our workshop, join the Career USA mailing list. Just scan this QR code or send a blank email to Career USA, the + subscribe at groups.io. You'll never be spammed, but what you will get every day is the topic of the day, the title of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. Please note, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our speakers are volunteers. I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done over the last 15 years has just been to help you land your next great opportunity. So thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Have a great Thursday. We hope to see you tomorrow morning.